One of the most common materials when you tie invertebrates is probably dubbing. There are many different types of dubbing, different textures, different colors, synthetics, naturals. We use them in saltwater flies and many streamers as well, but most commonly in invertebrates. And the important thing is to know how to use them and when to use the right dubbing with the right technique. And the finish that you want on that dubbing will probably determine the type of dubbing and the technique that you need to use with that dubbing, or in order to achieve what you want to achieve. The most common way of using dubbing is what I want to demonstrate now, as I've had some requests from guys asking for this, is just to wrap dubbing onto thread, which is a very simple technique and probably the first technique that you learn when you start to use dubbing or when you start to tie flies. This technique works very well with softer dubbings, whether it's synthetics or naturals. It works very well. It gives a smooth finish on the fly or whatever you want to achieve, not a very hairy or buggy finish. But it's definitely a technique that you need to know and that you will be using quite often. I use it on small flies, predominantly on the abdomen of flies, not very often on the thorax, unless it's very small flies like size 18s and 20s, more like micro patterns. So, and I'm going to show it with a few different dubbings. There's 2 or 3 different dubbings that I want to show you. The first one I'm going to use is a normal camel dubbing, which is a very fine fiber. So what you do is you spread the dubbing out a little bit, very thin. Always make sure you use as little as possible, because too much dubbing can make a fly look very bulky very quickly, and you can't achieve what you want to. You can't get that right shape or that right profile in the fly if you use too much dubbing. What you do is spread it out like that, put the thread on top of it with your forefinger behind it, and all you're going to do is you're going to just twist, just rub the dubbing onto the thread. Do that. See, it starts to twist onto the dubbing, and you just keep doing that in one direction. Don't go both directions. And as it gets tighter, you move down and you twist it all the way down. You just keep twisting down, and you cover the thread like that. So you have a piece of thread open there, and that's very easy to solve that problem. So instead of wrapping and just bulking up the hook, all you do is you slide the dubbing up. Just slide it up to that spot, make sure it's nice and flat on the thread, twist where it needs a bit of a twist, make sure it's nice and tight, and all you do is you start to wrap it around. And again, make sure your wraps are nice and even next to each other, which will give you an even layer of dubbing on the hook. If you need to taper it a little bit, taper at the abdomen or something, just go back over itself. Wrap back, and then forward again. I'm using a bright color thread so you can see the thread, see what's happening to the thread, and that's all the way to the front, and there you've got a tapered abdomen. The hook I'm using is way oversized, it's just for demonstration purposes, but you can see the finish on that dubbing. Now, if you use a different dubbing that I want to show you is a synthetic dubbing, which is also a grip dubbing. It's a flashy nymph, or rather a fine super UV dubbing. I'm going to use a green color, peacock green. You do exactly the same with that. You open it up a little bit, rub it onto the thread with your thumb and forefinger. It's a very soft dubbing, it's very easy to rub on. And then exactly the same technique, just twist it onto the thread. gives a little bit of a different finish, besides the fact that it's a little bit more shiny, but it gives a slightly different finish, and that's it. And the last dubbing I want to show you is a coarser dubbing. It's also a grip dubbing. It's a flashy nymph dubbing, which is a blend between naturals and synthetics. Now, this dubbing is not very easy to use with this technique, and I never use it with this technique because it just doesn't rub onto the thread that nicely. I'm going to use a brown. It's a much coarser dubbing, and I normally use a different technique with this dubbing, like a split thread or a dubbing loop. And you'll see why I don't really use it with this technique. If you want a buggier finish, then you can use it, but if I want a buggier finish, there are other techniques that I'd rather use. There we go. And that rubs on. You'll see the technique. It's the dubbing, because of the longer, stiffer fibers, it tends to push away from the hook at some points, and it looks like it's going to come off the thread. So you can rub it on a bit tighter. There are ways of getting it on there that it will work, but I personally prefer just to use a different dubbing technique than to use with this dubbing or coarser dubbing. It just works easier, and you get a even better effect on that. So keep watching. We will be posting other dubbing techniques as well. Follow the YouTube channel, and please like it if you don't mind, and keep following us for new techniques, new materials, and all sorts of new things.